Good day, students. I am your tutor for Reading Support and Literature, Year 4, Semester 2. My name is Melinda Coffey, and as you will see, my contact details are on the screen. This presentation is to help you in preparation for your assignment, but also for the examination. So you'll see that there's also contact times on the screen where you can feel free to contact me if you have any questions or concerns about the assignment or your preparation for the examination. On the cover page of your assignments, there is also an email address. You can feel free to also send me an email if you need. Just some general notes in terms of preparing for the assignment and the examination. Remember that this presentation will help you to prepare for the assignment and the examination, but you need to also use your study guide. So it's very important that you go through your entire study guide, that you take a look at all of the learning outcomes for each unit and also the learning activities for each unit. In that way, you'll know that you have gone through the work and you understand it. So usually what we say is, if you are able to put the information in your own words, then we know that you fully understand the work. So that should be your aim, is to be able to take all of the information in the study guide and translate it into your own words. Then you know you really have it well under the knee. Okay, so I want you to just make sure that you have the correct study guide for this module. It's the one that is written by Ms. Penny Ackerman in 2016. That has the title Bachelor of Education, Senior Primary, Reading Support and Literature. Okay, so you will see that in the assignment and in the examination, you have to answer all of the questions that is given to you. If you have to choose between two questions, it will be stated as such, and you will just have to answer either the one or the other. But all of the questions have to be answered in order for you to get full marks and to really do good in this module. So the mark allocation is a good guideline for you as to what exactly is expected of you, how much you should write. So if, for instance, a question says list something for 5 marks, you know that 5 facts have to be given. So if you are listing more than the 5, you will not be receiving more marks. You only receive marks for what is being asked of you. And the same with, for instance, a discussion question. If we ask a discussion question, it's important to write in paragraphs, not to list items in bullet points underneath each other or just write down the keywords. It's important to write in paragraphs, to fully explain that you understand the work, and very important, put it in your own words, and also give your own opinion, especially with questions that have verbs like discuss or argue. Because those are the types of questions where we want to see what is your point of view on the specific topic that is being discussed. Okay. Your assignment should be in an academic format, which means that there has to be a cover page which contains all of your information. And there also has to be an index, which means that you say that you list that there will be 5 questions or 4 questions or how many ever. And then importantly, to cite your source at the end in a reference. It's important, if you use the information from the study guide in your assignment especially, you have to indicate at the end that that's where you got your information. If you use the information from somewhere else, it's also important to list where you received the information, because we are using other people's words and other people's information, and it's important to give them also a reference to state that it was their work done. So when doing your assignments, it's important to please not copy everything directly from the study guide. We already know what the study guide says. We want to know what you think about the work. So take a look at the study guide and then put it in your own words in the assignment. In the examination, the same basic principles count. You will also have a cover page on which you must please write all of your information that's asked for. Please read the instructions carefully. That's also on the examination script. Exams will be answered on the script, so you will be given the space to write down. Your assignment can either be typed or handwritten, but it needs to be neat and legible. As well as the examination, please write as neatly and legibly as you can, so that we can really read what you are writing and understand the work very well. Okay, so now we're going to be taking a look at each one of the study units. For this specific module, Reading and Literature Support, there are 4 study units in the study guide. So study unit 1 is about selected theories of reading processes. Okay, so there will be quite a few slides on each of the study units. I'm just going to tell you what are the learning outcomes for study unit 1. Because if you read through the learning outcomes, you'll know what is the most important things that you need to focus on. And the same with the presentation. It will highlight the most important things to read through and to learn that will be asked in the assignment and also asked in the examinations. Okay, so the learning outcomes for study unit 1 is to explain the reading process. So reading, it's important to know what is reading, what is the benefits of reading, which is on here. But then there's also a process to reading. So the process meaning that there's certain steps involved through which learners go in order to become fluent readers at the end of the day. Then analyze the reading process as a complex developmental process. So reading consists out of, you have to know word recognition and comprehension and then also fluency. So these 3 slides show you exactly what learners need to develop those 3 focus areas. It's important to also just take note that there's 2 different areas. The one is the 5 stages of reading, and the other is the 5 developmental stages of learning to read. So it's important to just note the difference between the 2, and if you read a question that is asked about stages of reading, just make sure that you read the question carefully, whether it asks for the stages of reading or the developmental stages of learning to read. Then there's 5 stages of learning to read. So reading is all about this developmental process through which children go. Then it's also important to know that motivation is essential for the reading process. So you need to read through why is motivation important and how does it impact the reading process for children. Then when it comes to reading process as a complex developmental process, it's important that you read through all of the information and put it in perspective for yourself. Make sure that you understand what does it mean when we say it's a complex developmental process. So just the same as a child would go through different developmental stages, learning to read is exactly the same. They'll go through different stages. So you just need to be able to explain what is meant by that statement, that it's a complex developmental process. And then to also know the 5 different stages in learning to read. Then the next learning outcome is that there's different theories or models of reading. So in this module, there's 4 different theories. It's traditional, cognitive, hybrid, and metacognitive. So it's important to be able to describe each one of these individually as a model, but also to be able to say, how does one compare to the other? What does one consist of that's differently from the other models or theories of reading? So there we have cognitive, we have our hybrid theory, and our metacognitive theory. Then there's a number of skills that influence learning to read, or So these are phonemic awareness, alphabetic principle, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. It's important to know the difference between these and to be able to describe them, each of them as well. Then another learning outcome is to be able to analyze the common reading problems found basically around the world. So these reading problems are dyslexia, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, auditory processing disorder, and visual processing issues. So it's important that you know how to describe what each of these is. So be able to give a good definition of each of these. Then another learning outcome is to propose how to create a reading culture within a school. So in your study guide, you'll note that there's quite a lot of different ways that a reading culture can be established in a school. And this will be all over the school. So you will have areas like the school entrance foyer, the principal office, the library, the classroom. So what you can do here is to go through each of those and see what can be done in each of these areas to make it so that children are motivated at the end of the day to read. So how would you set up, for instance, a classroom? How would you create a reading culture within the classroom? Or how can, for instance, the principal's office be used to create a reading culture? What can he put up on the wall? What can he do as a principal? So to basically be able to describe within each of those areas how the reading culture can be established. Then another learning outcome is to give the characteristics of each of the developmental stages of learning to read. So it starts from the emergent reader, and then there's the early readers, transitional readers, and fluent readers. So each of those developmental stages has specific characteristics that a child will be able to display that shows that they are within that specific stage at the moment. So you will need to be able to describe those characteristics to give them through. Then there's also ways that teachers can support learners within each of these reading stages. So for instance, in the emergent reading stage, a teacher can take learners on a book walk and can also make connections to familiar words. So in the slide, it just gives the basic name of what can be done. You can read more about what does it mean taking learners on a book walk or making connections to familiar words. So you need to be able to describe these activities that can be done. Okay, so that was basically all of the important points for study unit 1 that you need to know. Study unit 2 now starts here, and it's all about the developmental role of reading and literature in a learner's holistic growth. So it starts off with the first learning outcome, which is the aims and psychological needs of learners. So in a classroom and in education as a whole, there's specific reading has a specific place. So it helps with cultural value, expanding horizons, building vocabulary, improving writing skills, and teaching critical thinking. So you just need to be able to, you need to read through these and be able to explain what do we mean, for instance, when we say that literature in a classroom can contribute towards cultural value of a learner. What does it mean it can contribute to expanding horizons? So for each of these, you need to be able to explain what is meant by that. Then another learning outcome is the types of reading and their purposes. There are 4 types of reading. You need to be able to explain them as individual types of reading, but also be able to, for instance, compare 2 of them to each other. So for instance, how is skimming different from scanning? How is scanning different from extensive reading? Then the next learning outcome is silent and loud reading. Both of them have a place in the classroom, so you need to be able to describe the place and the benefits of silent reading, but also of loud reading. The first slide is all about silent reading. There's the purpose of sustained silent reading. And then there's also loud reading, so the advantages of loud reading within a classroom. Then the next learning outcome is the different genres found in children's literature. In the study guide, you will note that there's many more than what is listed here on the slide. You should be able to know a good amount of them, and then also be able to describe these genres. So it's not just enough to know the name of the genre, please be able to also describe this genre. Then the biggest part, and what study unit 2 is all about, is the role that literature plays in the growth of learners. So the first is, what role does it play in developing a learner's moral values, their gender role, and their sexual identity? So the slides is just a very brief description of what is given in the study guide. Please read through it carefully in the study guide and be able to come to a good conclusion about what kind of role literature plays in the development of learners' moral values, gender roles, and sexual identity. How does specific literature have an impact on these areas? You need to be able to describe the impact it has, but also to draw your own conclusion whether you think it has any value or not. Does it actually impact these areas of growth? The same with when it comes to promoting gender equity. You need to know what strategies teachers can use to promote gender equity. And then also children's literature has an impact on promoting children's understanding of themselves, but also of the world. So once again, you need to be able to know what impact does literature have here on this area of growth, and be able to draw your own conclusion. Do you think it has a big impact? Does it have a small impact? Does it even make a change at all? Then it continues. There's also within that same scope area about empathy. So how is children's empathy, the development of empathy, affected by literature, by stories that they read? Then the next learning outcome is that there's specific criteria to keep in mind when selecting suitable books for learners. So there's some things that you need to look at, or a teacher needs to look at when they are selecting books for learners to read in a classroom. It's whether there's compelling content, realistic characters, is the picture books, does they have strong, colorful illustrations, and also then finding the books that you as a teacher want to use in the classroom. So in the study guide, you will also see that there's specific things to look at when selecting storybooks, information books, and looking at illustrations or designs. So please read through that section as well and be able to describe, if a teacher wants to go select a storybook, what are the things that teacher should look out for to make sure that they are choosing the correct storybook? Or when it comes to an information book, because when selecting an information book versus a storybook, you will look for different things basically. Then study unit 2 ends off with how to get learners to have a balance between sport, watching television, and reading. So this section is all about creating a balance amongst learners so that they are able to basically fit in all of the things that happen in normal everyday life and still make sure that they cover each aspect. So they get to their schoolwork, but they also do some sport, and they also have time to relax when they are at home. So you need to be able to say specific things that athletes or learners can do so that they have this balance. So for instance, to get organized and stay organized, to plan their week, to not get behind on their schoolwork. And then also you need to be able to draw a conclusion as to whether you think there's any value, for instance, in teaching children this. Should we teach children to strike a balance between their home life and their school life and their sport life? or is it not really necessary for a teacher to be able to help them with that? Is that more something that parents must do at home, for instance? Then study unit 3 is all about the characteristics of effective teaching of reading. So what are the characteristics that is present in teaching children effectively how to read? And it starts off with the fact that learners must be prepared for reading through different reading readiness activities. So the readiness activities is visual perception, visual discrimination, form constancy, visual memory, sequential memory, visual spatial relation, and figure ground. So it's important to know each of these, but also to know how to describe them, and also to say that each of them have specific activities that should actually be done. So apart from knowing the name and being able to define it or describe it, you also need to know some of the activities that each of these have underneath them. Then the next learning outcome is multimodal text. So what is a multimodal text? Is all described here. You need to be able to define what's a multimodal text, and also to be able to describe why would we use multimodal text within a classroom setup. What are the benefits thereof? Then the next reading outcome is that there's specific reading skills that a teacher must apply when reading to learners. So reading out loud. For instance, like planning enough time, previewing the book yourself, reading with expression, allowing time for the learners to study the pictures. So there's quite a couple of skills that the teacher needs to have in place when reading aloud to learners. And it's important that you are able to also list these. Then the next reading outcome is all about a reading lesson plan. So a teacher doesn't just walk into a classroom and start reading a book. It's important to put together a good reading lesson plan. And in your study guide, you will see there's a whole section about creating a reading lesson plan, how you put it together, what needs to be in it. So please read through this and make sure that you understand what this lesson plan looks like. Then there's also a section, another outcome is all about reading comprehension. So strategies that can be used to improve reading comprehension. And first of all, it describes what is reading comprehension and what learners need to be able to do, and then things that they can do to improve this reading comprehension. Then another item is then reading retention. So apart from that, children need to be able to comprehend what they read, they also need to be able to remember what they read. So this is where reading retention comes in. And you need to know how can the reading retention be developed within children. And then the next learning outcome is all about the reading corner. So when it comes to the reading corner, it's important that you read through the information in the study guide, but that you think about, if I set up a reading corner in a classroom, what are the things or the items that I want to see in a reading corner? So what will I provide the children so that they are comfortable in this reading corner? So for instance, you would put cushions on the floor, you would have a nice warm carpet, you'll have maybe some chairs, you'll definitely have bookshelves, you'll have books to read. You might even create a lending out system where they can come and they can take a book and bring it back. So basically think about, what would this reading corner look like? Then the next learning outcome is about preparing learners for silent reading. So you need to be able to describe how would a teacher prepare learners for silent reading. So for instance, they would pace the reading, make it engaging, make it relevant, and manage the reading. So you need to be able to describe what would a teacher do to prepare children for the silent reading. And then also, why is it important for teachers to introduce small reading groups within a classroom? what are the benefits to having a small reading group? What does a learner, for instance, get from joining a small reading group that they would not have gotten if they just read as a whole classroom together, for instance? Then we move on to study unit 4. So study unit 4 is about the assessment of reading programs, and providing learner support for specific reading difficulties. So the first area is to propose reading assessments, or the purpose of reading assessment in the senior primary phase. So doing assessment has a specific purpose, otherwise we would not have been doing this assessment at all. So it assesses the strengths and weaknesses, it assesses meta-linguistic awareness, it enables the teacher to plan a personalized reading program for every learner. So if they have problems, if they are struggling in a certain area, the teacher knows where to focus. And it also examines a reader's ability to read text, but also single words. So reading a sentence or a paragraph, but also words on their own. And this will also then explain or show where maybe some problems are coming out. Then we have a specific reading assessment that is used, is the early grade reading assessment. So it's important to know what does the early grade reading assessment assesses, and that is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. And then please be able to also describe what is the early grade reading assessment, so to be able to give the definition as it is. Then there's a difference between having formative continuous assessment and summative assessment. Please know what the difference is and be able to describe both of these. Then continuous assessment can be used as a tool to assess your learner's reading. So what is meant by this statement? You need to be able to say, how would we use continuous assessment as a tool? How does it show that a learner has reading abilities? Then there are some common reading difficulties in senior primary phase. This is also a learning outcome. And these 4 common reading difficulties is slow reader, that they cannot read for long periods, that their comprehension skills are not keeping up, and that the child does not enjoy reading. Now it's important to note the difference between the reading problems or the causes of reading difficulties listed within the earlier study unit, which was dyslexia and ADHD and visual processing abilities and auditory processing abilities. So those are the causes of reading difficulties, and then these ones listed here are the common reading difficulties. So for instance, that a child will be a slow learner, there can be a specific cause to that. So please note that there's a difference between the two, and make sure when you read the question what the question specifically asks for. Then learners in the senior primary phase struggle with specific reading difficulties. So it means that there's a problem in either the decoding, the comprehension, or the retention. So you need to be able to say, to be able to discuss each of these. So for instance, decoding. What does that mean when we say there's a problem there? And then what are the signs that point to there being a specific problem? So that is with decoding, the same with comprehension, and then the same also with retention. Then another learning outcome is standardized tests. So being able to explain what is a standardized test, but also the most common forms of standardized tests. And then the question that remains is, how useful is standardized testing? So you need to be able to draw your own conclusion from all of the information that is in the study guide. Is there a benefit to using standardized tests, or is there no benefit? You need to be able to give through the facts, but also draw your own conclusion whether you think there is a benefit or not. Then there's multiple forms of learner support that can be offered for reading difficulties faced by learners. There's making instructions more explicit, providing systematic instruction, increasing opportunities for practice, applying skills and strategies in meaningful text. So you need to be able to read, to explain each of these. What do we mean by that? How is the support offered to a learner and how does it help? And then there's also a section where it describes specific reading difficulties such as stammering, rhythm, intonation, and vocabulary. How can you help a learner to overcome or to be able to cope with those specific learning disabilities? So stammering is where they struggle to get the words out. Rhythm in this case is not a musical rhythm, so it has nothing to do with teaching kids how to clap their hands or use a drum. It's rhythm as in when you are reading, that kind of rhythm that you have to be able to read at a specific pace and with specific tone. So it's that rhythm. And then intonation and vocabulary as well. You need to be able to describe how can a teacher support learners in the classroom in each of these reading difficulties. Then there are specific techniques that can be used to give constructive or corrective feedback to learners after they have read. So you should be able to name the technique, but also be able to describe the technique. So if we say feedback should be given in a timely manner, what is meant by that? For instance, that feedback should be given immediately after reading has taken place so that you can discuss it at that moment and not later when the child has already forgotten what they've read or what happened. Then the unit ends off with the use of digital video cameras and sound recorders within the classroom setting. So how it can be used to improve education and to improve teaching. You need to be able to describe how can digital video cameras be used, but also how can voice or sound recorders be used by the learners within the classroom, but also perhaps at home. How can it be used maybe to do assignments or prepare for tests or when they are preparing for orals. So you need to be able to discuss digital video camera usage, but also audio sound recorders. And that then brings us to the end of the preparation for this module. As I said, you can use this presentation to prepare for the assignment and the examination. It covers the contents of both. And you are welcome if you have questions or you're struggling, please contact me. My number is on this presentation, but it's also on the cover page of the assignment that you will receive. Thank you very much and good luck. All the best with the exams and with the assignment.